There's a story I heard once about two martial arts masters. Both were unequaled in their skill, and they met to have a contest to see who was superior. They squared off and stood there, each waiting for the other to make the first move. They stood and stared and stared and stared for quite some time until finally one of them backed off and said, "I have been defeated." They didn't strike any blows or anything. They didn't have to. He could just tell. He knew the other guy had superior skills to his own. This movie is a little like that. We're talking about The Sword Identity, an Asian film from 2011, which I recently found on Amazon Prime, and it was quite unexpected. If you look on IMDb, you'll see this movie has a user rating of 5.4, but I think it's much better than that. I think people score it lower because they expect one thing and they get something else. See, this movie is not really about swordplay. It's not a flashy, razzle-dazzle, acrobatic sword-fighting movie with lots of blood where there's wire fu and a high kill count. That's what the viewer might expect. In fact, I don't think anyone actually dies in this movie. It's a little hard to tell, but while some people are clearly disabled or incapacitated, it looks like most of the fighters just get knocked out. None of them appear to have mortal injuries. Well, let's get into it. The story goes like this. Three people come to town. One is an old mentor, and the second is our hero, a young fighter. Now, many years ago, the Japanese invaded China, and a great Chinese general studied how the Japanese used their swords. Using that knowledge, he designed a better, superior sword based on theirs that would defeat the enemy. The mentor learned this from the general. Now, the mentor and the hero want to open a school to teach students about this new sword so they can pass on the techniques so the knowledge won't be lost. However, before they can do that, they must first win the approval of 4 other established schools so they can have permission to start their own. That's how it worked. And the 4 masters aren't having anything to do with this new sword. They feel, how can you have a Chinese weapon based on a Japanese one? The masters are old, set in their ways, and they have a lot of hubris. So the 2 men have to fight both the masters and their students to prove the new sword's value and worth. The third man who comes to town is an old master who used to run one of the schools, but years ago when his wife was unfaithful, he got a case of the SADS and left to live in seclusion in the mountains. Hearing, incorrectly, that a Japanese menace was threatening the honor of the schools, he returns to fight this new enemy. What follows is a running contest between the 3 factions, the men with the new sword, the masters running the 4 schools and their students, and the old master. Added into the mix is a squad of soldiers who also incorrectly think the hero and his mentor are Japanese invaders. Things reach a point where even the mentor gives up. Let it go, he says. Let knowledge of this new sword technique die. They don't deserve it. But the young hero isn't having any of that, and he keeps fighting to prove the new sword is superior and deserving of its own school. One thing I really love here is that underneath everything is a layer of subtle humor that keeps everything buoyant, and as I say, nobody actually seems to get killed. What you see is the form, the art, the tradition of fighting with these weapons, and as such, it's not supposed to be a fatal contest, kind of like jousting was in the days of chivalry. In the movies, opponents in a joust tried to kill one another, but in reality, the lances were designed to break. You were just supposed to unseat the knight, not kill him. And we see a similar idea here. There's a training session where two students fight with spears, and you see one sort of faint, then jump back, then the other does the same thing, and it's almost like a dance. They aren't really trying to stab each other. So this movie will probably feel a little slow. It takes its time. It's not the typical chop-socky kung fu picture, and it's not Jet Li style action. I love those movies, but this one is more serious, more studied. The fights are interesting, the humor is subtle but welcome, and the motivations of the main characters are revealed at appropriate moments. Everything just fits. This is a very good film, and well worth your time. As such, I'm giving The Sword Identity 3 paws up. You take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.